welcome into this episode of the Bear Down Buzz podcast. As always, myself, Eli, joined by Joe and Isaac. Fellas, the Bears were on a bye week this week, so unfortunately they did not get a win or a loss, which depending on how you look at it, can be a good thing. So Bears still at 4-2, but a lot did happen within the NFL and the NFC North in general. So let's kind of start there. Joe, start us off with this matchup between the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings. A lot happened in this game and has major implications for this division race, as all teams are kind of right there. So start us off with this Detroit and Minnesota matchup. What do you think of the Lions win over Minnesota?
So first I want to start with fun game to watch, especially when you don't really have rooting interest in either team. Obviously, we're Bears fans, but I do like what the Lions have been doing over the past 3 years with Dan Campbell and that offense and just the way they play. So, not just because we need the Vikings to lose, but because I kind of also like the Lions. I was rooting for the Lions. Obviously, when they play the Bears, screw that. I want the Bears to win. But yeah, the game was very interesting. It started out looking like the Lions were going to get killed. They went down 10-0 early in the first half. Campbell, for some reason, went for it on 4th and 7. Like, pointed on 4th and 7. I don't know why you would do that on his first drive. Like, I get he's aggressive, but that just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know how they dug themselves out of that hole, but they ended up digging themselves out of that hole. And we're up, I think, 21-10 at half. Then, then in the second half, they kind of continued their dominance and won and took the game in the fourth quarter. I think they were up 28-17 or not 28, but 24-17, something like that. 20, maybe 21-17. 24. It's 21-20 or 24. If anyone could check that and correct
I
me.
believe
But
it
they were
was
up.
21-17 Minnesota in like just after the third quarter started.
Okay. That and then they got a touchdown to make it 24. That sounds correct because they got a touchdown to make it 24-21. Here, I'm just gonna look at the score log. Because I want to get this correct.
Yeah, I might have misspoke. I think it was 21 Detroit, Minnesota 17. 10:42 left in the third quarter, and then Detroit scored after that.
And so then, yeah, Detroit. Um, give me starter. Why did that do that? I'm pulling up this. I just want to get it right. I know you said that. I'm just triple checking.
For sure.
Um,
Yeah. It was
so
it was a back and forth.
20. It
Yeah,
was
go ahead.
20. It was 21-10 going into halftime, and then the Lions. Then Minnesota scored on their first drive. Then the Lions scored, so it was 28-17 going into the fourth quarter. 28-17 going into the fourth quarter. Um, the game, and then in the fourth quarter, at some point, the Lions fumbled. David Montgomery fumbled the ball, got punched out. It was a nice peanut punch. Uh, the Vikings then returned it to the house. I think what confused me is they ended with 29 points. And I was trying to do the math there. What happened was they um they went for two instead. They went for two and kicked the field. They went for two and then kicked the field goal at some point during the game. Because they ended the fourth quarter with 12 points scored. So that's the only way that could happen, right? Unless
No, I
field
think
goal,
that's right.
yeah, something like that. But it's they ended up down 28-17. And then they kicked the field goal. Yeah, two field goals, and then a that fumble recovery touchdown, which really changed the game. Made it look like the Vikings were going to win, but on last on the last like a 2 minute drill, the the Lions took it down the field and scored the field goal. Um, who with 15 seconds left to win the game. So very competitive. Uh, nice, like I said, nice to see the Vikings lose. We we needed that to happen to make the division race closer. Uh, the Vikings definitely showed a lot more weakness this week than most weeks. They were getting beat by one major play. Uh, Like the Lions ran the same play like 5 or 6 times and it beat them every single time and attacked their coverage. And even though the Vikings were blitzing, they blitzed like 55% of the time. Pressure really wasn't getting to Goff. He started the game, I think 12 for 12, which is this is the third week in a row that he's on that or better than that. Like third game in a row, not week in a row, because they had a bye in between at some point. Um, right? Yeah, because they're 4-2, but 5-1. So they had a bye. But yeah, a couple weeks ago against Seattle, he was perfect. He went 18 for 18 in the game. Um, and then I think he started the next game like 10 for 10 or 11 for 11. Um, but yeah, Golf has been lights out. The I'm surprised about how well the Lions defense did without um Aiden Hutchinson. I know they gave up 29 points, but I expected it to be a lot worse because Hutch was the one that got a lot was had the most pressures before he got hurt in the league and sacks. So losing him, I figured the Lions defense would just look like it did last year, even though they do technically have a better secondary. It just getting pressure is really what helps the secondary look good, which we learned that last year when we got Sweat, that the Bear secondary skyrocketed when we got Sweat. But yeah, I'm just surprised at how good their defense looked. Obviously, we know how good the Lions offense is. They got two great running backs. Montgomery got hurt in that game, but he can't ended up coming back. But while he was gone, Gibbs broke a 50-yard rushing touchdown off, which I wasn't too happy about because I was playing Jahmyr Gibbs in fantasy. He got about 30 points. Uh, was upset with that, but yeah, overall, Lions probably looked like they're gonna make the Super Bowl. The I know we're not gonna really talk about the Niners. The Niners put the Chiefs and they got obliterated. They just lost Brendan Ayuk for the season with an MCL and an ACL injury, so they won't have him for the rest of the year. They might not. Who knows when they're getting McCaffrey back? And Debo's also hurt, so like they might put themselves out of the playoff race in the next couple of weeks here, unless McCaffrey comes back in the next couple of weeks. But if McCaffrey doesn't come back in the next couple of weeks and they're like 3-6, they might not activate McCaffrey and just have him rest for the rest of the year and get better for next year. But we'll see. Obviously, we got to keep an eye on that because the Bears play the Niners, I think, in weeks 15 or 16. Um, but yeah, that circling back to the Lions and Vikings, great game. Uh, these division games are going to be very, very tough when we get to the Lions and Vikings, and even the Packers. These next from weeks 11 to 18. Uh, Isaac, I'll toss it to you. What were your thoughts on the Lions and Vikings game?
Yeah, I'll be pretty short on this one, but um it's nice to see that the Vikings are not like some supernatural team that it was nice to see them get humbled. And for the Lions, I saw this chart the other day where they are by far the most efficient team in the NFL when it comes to just overall executing. And to me, I'm worried about the Lions because they're a really good team, obviously, along with the Packers and the Vikings. But for some reason, just have good luck against them. I don't know if it's because Eberflus figured out how to stop Jared Goff, but it seems like every time we play the Lions, we always have a chance to win, and we usually do. So that's not what I'm obviously like I'm happy to see the Lions doing well because as much as I don't like them, they've had really bad seasons for pretty much a long time, and for them to finally get it going now, especially with Dan Campbell and all the young players that they have been performing at high levels, it's nice to see. But um, yeah, it was nice to see a game that with the Vikings and Lions where both teams played really well. Um, I understand for Brian Flores like trying to blitz Jared Goff, but at the same time, like Goff is one of the better quarterbacks in the league when it comes to playing against the blitz. So it was a little interesting to see Flores not really back off from his usual like blitzing mindset, but yeah, just it was nice to see. And Eli, did you have any thoughts on the Vikings Lions game?
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting how similar both of these teams' production was on this day. I think it just really came down to which team played more physical football near the end, and more times, often than not, the past few seasons, that's been the brand of football for the Detroit Lions, and it was evident by the 31-29 win over Minnesota. But it also shows you how razor thin the margin of error is going to be in these divisional games, because uh, back when Green Bay and Minnesota played, obviously it wasn't a close game for much of the game, but Green Bay is well coached enough to never be completely out of it. And I think that's just going to be the case for these NFC North matchups, no matter who's playing. So, getting all of these divisional matchups before we have our first in Week 11, I think, is going to be a huge factor in our success in the North. So it's just nice to kind of see all of these NFC North teams pull out the stops to win these divisional matchups, and it's gonna bode well for our chance in the North if we can get some of this NFC North film under our belt before we face Green Bay in Week 11. So keeping on the trend of the NFC North, we can kind of move on to this Houston and Green Bay game. Joe, I'll start with you again. A 24-22 victory for the Green Bay Packers over the Houston Texans. Your general thoughts on this one? I know Stroud didn't have a very good game, but give me your general thoughts on this matchup.
Yeah. So I'm going to be honest with you. I watched the other game more. I don't have NFL what the subscription service that's on YouTube, YouTube TV or whatever it is. So I and multiple screen games. So I was watching that game. I do know that the Packers got a bunch of pressure on Stroud. I think they got like 5 sacks and a bunch more pressures, which cost Stroud hell. And apparently, the Packers line played better against the uh edge rushers than the Bears line did, because I don't think they got as many pressures or sacks against Packers as they did against the Bears, which kind of sucks because I really wanted the Packers to lose that game. Obviously, uh, I had the Texans in a bet, uh, but in the parlay, but that didn't really screw me because I guess I don't really understand how certain things in bets work, but it didn't really screw me over. But I still wanted Texans to win that game, obviously. But they didn't play that well. I did see like the final couple minutes because I turned they had it on red zone, and then I had red zone on after, like, I was flipping between red zone and the Vikings and Lions game when it was on commercial. So the way that the Texans ended that game didn't make a lot of sense to me because they ran it on first and second down and when they were in the Packers territory, and then third on third down. Like, why did you do that? Because you wasted, instead of making the Packers waste their last time out, you save them a timeout by throwing it and making it incomplete. Like, I don't think the Packers win that game or have as good of a shot to win that game if you make them waste their timeout. And then you would have went up 22-21. They still had to go down the field and kick a field goal. Looks like they found a kicker finally. I mean, Brandon McManus has been good his whole career. So the fact that wasn't on that team, my dad was like, how is this guy not on a team? How did the Packers have him? I'm pretty sure it was because he was going through some legal issues or something. So that's why the Packers were able to get him. But if the Packers now have a clutch kicker, it's not good for anybody because they always find a way to like be in games at the end and just need a kicker. And the past 2 years they haven't had a kicker to do that. So now with McManus, they literally can win any game. Although it's not like they blew out the Texans, which the Bears didn't get blown out by the Texans. So I think the Bears and Packers are kind of closer than many would think. Now, when we get to that game preview, I don't think I'm gonna pick against the don't think I'm gonna pick the Bears to win either of them because they just haven't shown us they could do that in the past 5 years. But still, I think the game's gonna be really close. Um, but yeah, sucks the Packers won. Like they finally have a kicker, like I said. Uh, I wish I watched a little bit more of it just to see what Jordan Love did exactly because, like, I don't think Jordan Love is the best quarterback. Like, played really good the last 8 weeks of last year. But the stuff that I've seen from him this year, it literally just looks like he's throwing up balls sometimes, and he gets lucky that his receivers catch it. Like 2 weeks ago against was that last week or 2 weeks ago when they played the
The
Cardinals?
Rams.
He threw a
Oh,
the Cardinals. He threw a ball to Romeo Dobbs. The cornerback very badly misplayed the ball. If the cornerback was closer, it would have probably been picked because he just threw it up. Like that wasn't a good pass. But he has a lot of those, but he does have some really like good passes too. But he does have the 50-50 jump balls that go either way. Um, and sometimes land with the Packers and sometimes don't. So if the Bears, if the Bears could land some of those when they play the Packers, the Bears will win. Again, we'll talk about that more in a couple weeks when that game's coming up. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
yeah. And then for me, first it was funny watching the fight with Stephon Diggs and Jair Alexander because in my I mean personally like those two guys are probably one of my least favorite NFL players. I never liked Jair. Just I mean if I was a Packers fan, maybe I would like him because I like how he's always like getting into people's you know always messing up with people and stuff like that. But as a Bears fan, like he just seems really annoying to me. And then the same thing with Diggs. But to be honest, I had Red Zone on and I just was laying down watching TV. It was nice to not have a Bears game where I had to keep on switching back. So I did watch more towards the end of the game with the Packers and Texans, but I was noticing that like the Texans like the Daniel Hunter and Will Anderson, they were always getting so close to Jordan Love, but most of the time it wasn't resulting in anything. It was just more merely a pressure. But I was rooting for the Texans. I really wanted the Texans to win. And like Joe mentioned, just the way they handled the end of the game, I feel like they just basically handed it to Green Bay. Like, I don't know why they wouldn't try to get Green Bay to waste their final timeout. And then it just, I mean, and my thing, I was trying to think about this and I was like, maybe DeMarco Ryans kind of thinks of uh Brandon McManus is like, oh, he's new. He's probably gonna miss. We can ice him, which they did ice him, but he was still able to make it. Um, and then like Joe mentioned, like just watching Jordan Love sometimes when he throws up those like I don't even know, like I'm pretty sure coaches would get really mad at Jordan Love if he would to continue doing this because he did this against the Rams too, where he threw it up to Jaden Reed, and when there was like three Rams defenders on him, and he still ended up with the ball. But I don't know, maybe it's just like a Packers thing, especially with Rodgers always throwing up those Hail Marys, and then it always seems like it goes to it favors the Packers. But yeah, I was gonna ask you, Eli, what are your thoughts on the Packers Texans game?
Yeah, I think Jordan Love is just slowly morphing into Brett Favre. I think that's what we're seeing from his career arc so far. Just those passes, uh, and those games to where, sure, he throws 3 touchdowns, but 2 picks right behind him. So, the discourse on Jordan Love is super interesting because it feels like 50% of the NFL thinks he's a top 7 guy, and then the other half thinks he's a bottom 16 guy that just gets lucky every now and then. And I'm kind of somewhere right there in the middle with Jordan Love. I don't think he is a bad quarterback by any means, but I also don't think he's worthy of top 5 money like he's been paid. And you're kind of seeing that. You're kind of seeing the limited reps that he's had in his career. He's still winning games, which is the main thing for Green Bay right now, is that in spite of whether or not Jordan Love is having all these turnovers, they're coached well enough and they have a good enough offensive line and a run game to support these turnovers. And that was evident by them beating Houston. But it's interesting because they're just, like I said, they're winning games in spite of everything that's going wrong for them, which is going to be interesting, again, as we mentioned, this NFC North division battle as we keep moving throughout the season. It was interesting, though, in this game, CJ Stroud was sacked 4 times, Joe, as you kind of mentioned earlier. So the Houston offensive line hasn't been up to par this season, whereas Green Bay, you're kind of seeing the opposite. Green Bay always just seems to know how to find talented offensive linemen. I believe it's a second rounder on that offensive line, a fifth rounder, a first, and maybe like a third. So it's all over the place for them with the offensive line, but they always seem to somehow get a cohesive unit for whoever is under center. But I agree. I'm not sure. I think it was you, Joe. I think the Bears and Packers are closer in talent than most would think. I think we've got them roster wise, but it just, you can't underestimate a good coach. And that's the main thing for Green Bay is that they win these types of games in which the other team makes a costly decision and Green Bay capitalizes on that. So that's going to be something to monitor as we move forward. But kind of veering away from the NFC North in some other news, as we kind of saw on Sunday Night Football, Justin Fields was benched in place of Russell Wilson, and we were all kind of in agreement that it was the wrong decision. But as Mike Tomlin has stated in the past, that's why I get paid the big bucks. He made the crazy decision to bench Justin Fields after a 4-2 start, and Russell Wilson came out and lit it up against the Jets. I believe the final score is like 37-15, something like that.
Yeah,
Correct.
37-15.
37-15 win for the Steelers. So they improved to 5-2. And Isaac, I'll start with you this time. For what it seems like the Bears are going to miss out on a fourth round pick. Presumably, they're going to move forward with Russell Wilson as the Steelers offense is finding its way. So what are your thoughts on this whole situation with Pittsburgh?
Yeah, obviously disappointed. And two things. One is that we all were wrong. I mean, I didn't think that Russell was going to have the type of performance he did have. Then granted, the Jets defense hasn't been the best. They were supposed to be a top 10 unit on defense, but they've had numerous injuries. So it looks better than what I think it's gonna end up turning out to be. I feel like as the weeks go on for Russ and the Steelers, they're kind of gonna hit back to reality, and it's be like, okay, well, maybe Russ is kind of washed, or we'll see. But and then the second thing is like obviously we wanted that fourth round pick instead of the sixth round pick. Um, but trying to look at it in a positive sense, like it's okay. It's not like a high draft pick anyways. Like a fourth rounder isn't going to be the same as like a first or second rounder. And looking at it from a different perspective, we do have Carolina's second round pick, and they're currently 1-6. They are in the second. I believe they have the second overall pick as of right now. So we would have pick 34 from them, and we can really get a foundational piece on offense because pick 34 is basically like a late first round pick. Um, but yeah, and as someone who loves Fields, I was pretty sad that Justin was benched, and it does kind of look like he was part of the problem. I don't know if he was the main problem, but you could see it I saw a picture of it was Russ and then Pickens and Najee Harris. They were all like huddling up together. They all smiles and stuff like that. So I'm glad that Mike Tomlin has, the balls to be able to make a big decision like that, because a lot of the media and fans were questioning it. And I mean, as of right now, it looks like it's paying off for the Steelers, but we'll see what happens with them in the future. And I'll toss it over to you, Joe, and your thoughts with everything that's been going on with Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I'm super ball sophisticated and know stuff about football like some of the other like pundits. Like obviously people like players that have played the game. I obviously don't know as much about it as them, but other people know a lot more about football than me. But I will say, Russ did not look good that first half. He looked washed. He looked like he shouldn't have been put in the game. He missed. He started the game 4 for 11. He ended the game 18 for 29. So he came back and what completed 14 of 14 of 18, which is which is way better than what he started with. But yeah, at the start of the game, I questioned why you take him out. Why'd you take Justin out? Russ looks terrible. And I know Justin obviously has his problems with reading the field and stuff, but Russ looked really, really bad to begin that game. He threw one of the worst passes I think I've ever seen. When that was a screen pass, and it didn't even get to the receiver. It was like 2 or 3 yards short of the receiver behind him. I've never seen that in my life before. Like it was terrible. Um, but yeah, he ended up coming back and throwing some nice touchdowns to George Pickens. He did throw a 50-50 ball to George Pickens that was very underthrown, and Pickens is lucky he caught it. He triple caught it basically, bounced off the receiver's head. Not sorry, it bounced off the defender's head. Then it hit him in the chest, and he bobbled it. And then it hit the. I think maybe then it hit the. Secondly, I think it hit the receiver in like the shoulder pad, and then he bobbled it, and then he had to re-secure it, dumping down to the ground. It was a very nice catch, but it was a very badly thrown ball by uh Russ, or underthrown ball by Russ. And then the other deep ball that Pickens caught, it was just a moon ball. Like that ball was that first catch that Pickens had was a ball that Justin could have thrown. I probably would have thrown it better because it was that moon ball was like kind of underthrown too, but it was less underthrown than the other one. But Russ had, like I said, had 2 really good passes to Pickens. Then that touchdown pass was a throw that Justin wouldn't make. He just wouldn't. I don't think I've seen him make that ever. But it was a nice touchdown pass. Pickens had a big day, which I'm glad about because I've have him in fantasy. It's his first big game of the year. Hopefully this continues with Russ. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Russ kind of regresses. I mean, he wasn't bad. Here's the thing: he wasn't terrible last year. They just in Denver. He had pretty good stats, but they just didn't want. Tom Payton didn't like him, so that's why he sat him. Um, but he also wasn't what he used to be last year. Like he was fine, he just wasn't great. I think you're going to get a fine quarterback with Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh. I think you're going to get a better quarterback than you would with Justin now after seeing one game. But I don't think he's going to bring them to the Super Bowl. I don't think he's going to be able to beat Mahomes, even with how bad the Mahomes and the Chiefs offense has been playing. Their defense is really good. I don't think he's going to be able to out duel Mahomes with their. I mean, both the defenses are quite equal, but Mahomes is obviously still the better quarterback. I don't see any way the Steelers make the Super Bowl with Russ. I don't think they would make it with Russ or with Justin either, but still, surprised that Russ ended up looking a lot better than uh everyone, most people thought he would.
Yeah, so just to recap for Russell Wilson on Sunday Night Football, he finished 16 for 29, 55.2% completion percentage, as was kind of evident there in the first half, as Joe kind of spelled out. 264 yards, a 9.1 average per attempt, and 2 touchdowns through the air. So, not a crazy good performance, but it was efficient. And the Steelers kind of just won that game on also the back of Najee Harris, who had 102 yards on the ground and averaged just under 5 yards per carry. So the Pittsburgh Steelers are kind of finding their way under Russell Wilson. And as Isaac also kind of mentioned, we'll see how it plays out in the next few weeks, whether he can kind of keep this ship running offensively for the Steelers, because they haven't had a lot of offensive success in the last few years. So maybe they're turning a corner here, or maybe it was just a Jets defense that we kind of all agree has underperformed this year. So as we kind of talk about trade stuff in general, as we all kind of agree that the 4th round pick has sailed away from Chicago, as the Steelers are going to move forward with Russell Wilson. It was reported by Adam Schefter that multiple players around the NFL are receiving trade calls, and among them are Nate Davis and Khalil Herbert for the Chicago Bears. And we'll get into some other big names around the NFL that the Bears could look at. But Isaac, I'll start with you once again. What do you think are realistic expectations for the Bears to cut bait with Nate Davis and to possibly send Khalil Herbert elsewhere?
Yeah, I'll start with Nate Davis. So first of all, I think at this point, anything that we can get for Nate Davis, we should take it, especially because Nate Davis has uh kind of a big contract for someone being on the bench. I think he signed a 3-year, $30 million deal, and he's slated to be signed with the Bears till after next offseason. So even if even if we could get like a 7th or 6th round pick, it's worth it because we're shipping off not only him but his contract as well. And then in terms of Khalil Herbert, I'm a big fan of Khalil Herbert. I feel like he's a guy that always gets those extra yards. And I don't. Okay, so I don't understand why Waldron doesn't give him a chance. Like I know everyone's saying like, oh, he doesn't fit in his system, like he doesn't fit in his play calls. But honestly, I think that's not, that's not a valid reason for the Bears not to use Khalil Herbert. I like Swift, and I'm really happy that he's had this kind of resurgence to being that running back that we hoped he would be. And same thing with Roshan. I'm glad that we're using him more, but putting in Herbert more, putting him in different packages here and there would be nice. I feel like Waldron just he hasn't given Herbert the opportunity to show that he's one of the better backs in the league. I remember when he was our featured back, he would always be in the top rankings in terms of like yards per game and stuff like that. So to to not give him a chance is kind of disappointing. And there was a report that the Vikings were interested in Herbert before they traded for Cam Akers. So um, obviously it looks like Poles values him and he's not going to just trade off Herbert for anything. Um, and I believe the Akers trade, I think the Vikings gave, I don't know if you guys could correct me, but like a 6th or 7th rounder. But anyways, I wouldn't trade Herbert unless it's probably like a 4th round or higher, which is a lot to ask for a guy that's been primarily on the bench this season. But with his tape and what we've seen from him in the past seasons, I just don't think it's worth it to trade him. Um, and it's a tough situation because we have Roshan that's on a rookie contract, and we also have Swift that just signed a 3-year, $24 million contract. So I get that it's kind of hard to have 3 running backs that are, on the roster that are going to get a lot of money, especially with Roshan. I'm pretty sure the Bears want to extend him maybe next contract, but we'll see about that. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. And then I'll toss it over to you, Joe. What were your thoughts on Nate Davis and Khalil Herbert being potential trade pieces for the Bears?
Yeah, Nate Davis, whatever you could get for him, do it. You just need to like, even if a team wants you to eat the money, eat the money. Well, I say that, but then I want them to have money to sign people in free agency. But like, get just if they want you to eat a portion of the money and they want him, trade him. He's not gonna play for us. I think Flus is done with not. I think Flus is done with Nate Davis. He just is. You can tell from how they're not using him. Like he's healthy and he's not starting. They went with Matt Pryor over him. So yeah, he's done. Get whatever you can for him. Um, as for Khalil Herbert, he like it's an interesting situation because everything you said is correct, Isaac. When he was starting for us, he was a really good back. But it's not surprising to see what has happened this year because obviously, like you said, they gave DeAndre Swift 3 years, 24 million. He's going to be the featured back. They really liked Roshan Johnson last year, but he was behind. He was behind Herbert and he was behind Deontay Foreman. But now with Foreman gone and this being Roshan's second year, they wanted to use Roshan a lot more. Um, so yeah, I think if Swift goes down and gets hurt this year, you plug Khalil Herbert in right away and he becomes the starter. But you don't know that's going to happen. And I don't think Khalil likes to being on the bench right now. I think he wants to be traded. Uh, so that's the conundrum you're in because Flus always says we have a pair and a spare. Right now, Herbert's a spare, and he's a very good spare to have. But Herbert probably doesn't want to be the spare, and he wants to be starter somewhere. And he could honestly, I don't know. I mean, I know the Cowboys aren't in anything, but Jerry Jones might think they're still in it somehow. For some delusional reason, they're not. They suck. They're not a good team. They're not a good roster. But if Jerry Jones thinks they still are, he might try to trade for a running back after he didn't sign Derrick Henry for some reason this offseason. So he might, Herbert could go to say Dallas. We can get like a third or fourth round pick for him. That'd be fine. But honestly, keep him. I mean, keeping him isn't a bad idea either. Because, like I said, if Swift goes down, he's an easy plug and play, and he'll be a good back. But then going back to the trading him side, if you trade him, you can hopefully what you have with Velas now, if DeAndre Swift goes down, Velas should do that same thing that Swift is doing. Although does have trouble catching, but hopefully he could fill in good for DeAndre if DeAndre were to go down and we traded Swift. But yeah, trade Nate Davis. I don't really have a good feeling on whether or not trade or keep Khalil Herbert. I'm fine with either way. How about you, Eli?
Yeah, I think we're all in the agreement that I think it would be best for the Bears specifically, if we kept Herbert. It's kind of ironic too that we're going into Commanders week because last year we saw, 2 to 3 of our running backs get injured in that game, and near the end it was Kari Blasingame at running back one, and that's not a situation you want to be in. So for a league that claims not to value running backs all that much, it is somewhat of a valuable position, especially when you have that depth that the Bears do right now, where your top 3 guys can come in and be a starter right away, and you can feel somewhat confident about them. I do like the idea of trading Herbert to Dallas, though, because just for the simple fact of he deserves a shot because he is a talented back, and I think he'd become a fan favorite in Dallas pretty quick just because of how hard of a runner is and how explosive he can be at times, and he's a decent pass blocker too. So he'd easily be the best back on Dallas right now if he were traded there. And as for Nate Davis, I'm completely with you, and I think you could get maybe a decent bit out of him just because simply he's a healthy offensive lineman in this league, and offensive line depth is one of the most important things in the National Football League. So there has to be some team out there that is hurt on the offensive line and they need whatever depth they can get. So if we can get a late round pick swap for the wide receiver that we spent a second round pick on, he shall not be named. I'm not going to say the name. Everybody knows who I'm talking about. But Poles has shown the ability to admit when he's made a mistake. And sadly, that wide receiver was one of them. And Nate Davis has also been one of them. So I think I'm with you guys. Take what you can get. And yeah, just take what you can get for Nate Davis and go into the next few weeks, presumably upgraded at the position without him on the roster, as sad as it is to say. But we've talked about trades. We've talked about everything relating to, potential trade compensation for the Bears and players that we've sent and players that we're thinking about sending. But we are going into week 8 after the bye, and we face the Washington Commanders. There was some major injury news for that team. Joe, I'll start with you. It was reported that Jaden Daniels did suffer a rib injury in that game. He played, I believe, 4 snaps or so. He was 2 for 2 last I checked when he was injured with that rib injury, and Marcus Mariota filled in as they beat the Panthers on Sunday. So your thoughts on the rib injury for Jaden Daniels as we go into Commanders week?
So Dan Quinn, I think you said this, but Dan Quinn said he's week to week today. That's really interesting to say about a quarterback. You really never hear that. Like you either hear they're injured and out or they're going to play. So him saying his week to week, kind of like I think that the likelihood is he probably will play even though like if you ask I'm one of the fans that am like fine I'm fine if Jaden doesn't play because that makes it easier for the Bears to win. I know other people are going to be like I want Jaden to play because I want the Bears to beat a good team or a team that has a quarterback. I'm not that way. Give me anyone we could take. We need anyone right now that we could take. Just I don't care. But it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see the injury report on Wednesday and Thursday because I mean, the Friday injury report definitely tells you a lot more. But Wednesday and Thursday, if he doesn't practice at all, he's not going to practice on Friday probably, which means he's not going to play. If he like is limited on Wednesday or doesn't practice Wednesday, is limited on Thursday, I would assume he practices full on Friday and plays on Sunday. But again, we don't know right now. We will see. We'll see on Thursday when we record and preview the game what is up with Jaden. But it does kind of suck to see Jaden go down because he's been having a good season, and the reason uh and this matchup is very intriguing with Jaden and Caleb, and that's why they flexed it to 325. But yeah, it sucks to see Jaden go down. What about you, Isaac? What are your thoughts on Jaden's injury?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit on the different side with you, Joe, when it comes to I really wanted to see Jaden Daniels play. But let me explain that something here. So on one side, it's like, yes, Jaden Daniels has a rib injury, and I don't think that he's gonna end up playing because the Commanders are in a position where they're probably looking at the Bears and like, okay, this Bears defense is legit. We don't know, we don't think that it's in um Jaden Daniels' best interest for him to be starting with a messed up rib and going up against this Bears defense because we don't want him to um make the injury worse and then for him to potentially be out for the whole season because the Commanders are 5-2 right now and they have a really good shot of making the playoffs. But on the other side, I could see some people being like, well, this is a huge game for us. We really need Jaden to be out there. So if he's healthy, he should play. And we could kind of risk, not getting that injury even worse than it is. So we'll see how this week goes, and on Thursday we'll talk more about it and our thoughts on whether Jaden should or should not play after we kind of see the injury report. But I was just really sad because this has been something that's kind of been brewing the last couple of weeks. Bears fans and Commanders fans haven't been really nice to each other. You could say on Twitter, a lot of people are kind of making fun of the Bear or the Commanders because they've been voting a lot for Jaden Daniels to win those Rookie of the Week, the Pepsi Rookie of the Weeks, and then Commanders fans are saying that stuff about Caleb and stuff like that. But um, kind of what Joe mentioned, like I'll take anyone if it's Marcus Mariota, then good because we have a way better chance of beating the Commanders with Mariota versus Daniels. But at the same time, it would have been really nice to see Jaden against Caleb in their rookie year because this game kind of could have had major implications for the potential Rookie of the Year, especially with Caleb really becoming a better quarterback these last couple of weeks, and Jaden kind of getting humbled a little bit, especially against the Ravens last game or last couple 2 weeks. But yeah, what were your thoughts, Eli, on this whole situation with Jaden Daniels and his injury?
I'll preface this by saying, as a football fan, I wish Jaden could go, and I wish we could see the quarterback matchup, number 1 and number 2, and kind of put this discourse to bed at least a little bit when it comes to the debate between should the Bears have taken Jaden Daniels, blah, 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 that kind of thing. But as a Chicago Bears fan, I'm with you guys. If the worst quarterback is going to play, that makes it a whole lot easier for the Bears to improve to 5-2 and keep up in this NFC North division and the NFC as a whole. Because this matchup will have major playoff implications. Philadelphia seems to be getting on the right track in the NFC East, and that bodes huge implications for the NFC playoff race. And if Jaden Daniels can't go, the Commanders might start to fall off a little bit, depending on the severity of his injury, as we kind of talked about. We'll get a more clear picture as we move throughout the week. What concerns me about him, though, is the talk around his injury. There's been a lot of phrasing used, several unknowns. I think Adam Schefter is how he put it. So you would think a rib injury would be pretty clear cut. You either injure your rib or you don't. It's either a fracture or a bruise. I think they did initial testing this morning, x-rays and stuff like that. And I believe they didn't say there was a fracture. But, playing quarterback with a rib injury, there's a lot of movement there. A lot of torque and a lot of just torso movement in general. And he's a mobile quarterback. So with a rib injury, if he can't have that aspect to his game, it makes that offense a lot more one-dimensional. So I'm kind of on the side that he's not going to play this week. I don't think the injury is as severe as people are making it out to be, but I also think that a franchise like Washington, where in the past you had a promising young rookie quarterback in RG3, and you forced him back too early after a major injury, and it derailed his career. So I think it's not the same injury at all. I don't want to compare the two, but I think it would be best for them to sit him for a week, give him time to heal. No matter what the severity of the injury is, they're still in a good chance and a good spot to make the playoffs. They don't have a bad squad at all. But I think rushing him back from an injury is the wrong thing to do. So I don't think he's going to play. But as a football fan in general, I wish he could go so that we could get a shootout. Jaden Daniels has been playing lights out, and Caleb has improved over the last 6 weeks. So I don't think he's going to go. But if he doesn't, then it makes things a whole lot easier for the Bears. Obviously, you don't want any player to be injured, but it does make things a whole lot easier for the Bears. So, Joe, I'll toss it back to you.
Sorry. Yeah, we're going to move off Jaden, but I want to quickly touch upon the 3 Bears injuries that we were talking about last week. So, Brisker is still in concussion protocol. Sounds like he's clearing the final steps. We don't know if he's going to be back for Sunday yet. Obviously, all these injuries we'll talk more on Thursday, but so we don't know what's going to be going on with Brisker. It sounds like Tyler Stevenson should be healthy, and then Tyler Gordon, that's again up in the air. We'll know more about that on Wednesday. I mean, there's really not much to say. If any of you guys have any thoughts on any of those 3 guys, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start. I just think with Kyler, especially with those hamstring injuries, they kind of can be a lingering injury, and I just don't see him playing this week. And who knows, maybe when we see the injury report on what I think it was Wednesday, we'll get a better idea with Kyler. But I don't think that the Bears are going to want to rush him, especially with muscle injuries like a hamstring. And with Brisker and Stevenson, it does seem like like Joe mentioned, Stevenson is on track to play on Sunday. And with Brisker, concussions can be a little, it varies case by case. And with Brisker, I think if I was Eberflus, and I know that Brisker's a heavy hitter, and he's not gonna just stop his usual way of tackling just because he has an injury. So I think that they're probably gonna tell Brisker to maybe sit this one out, and we'll see. We'll talk about it more on Thursday. But Eli, have you had any thoughts on these injuries?
Yeah, I think I agree with you that when it comes to concussion protocol, there's no clear-cut answer. It depends on a player-by-player basis, and he does have a history of concussions, so they're probably being a little more cautious with him. I think Tyreek will play. I think his thing was just a little tweak in practice, and they didn't want to further it, so I think he'll be good to go. Gordon, I do agree with you. The hamstring can be a thing to where if you rush him back, he's not going to be healthy. You've seen that time and time again with Christian Watson in Green Bay. He's had a history of hamstring injuries, and he just hasn't really been able to get past that. As far as I know, I think he's been healthy this season, but he does have a history of that, so we don't want that to be the same case for Kyler Gordon. So I don't think it'd be a bad week for him to sit out either. We've seen the depth in our secondary room. They've played well in place of our starters, so we'll get a more clear picture as the week progresses, but I don't disagree with either of those. I think depending on, again, how the week progresses, I'd be okay with those 2 not playing. You want everybody to be healthy, but I think we'd be okay if they didn't go. So with that being said, unless anyone has anything else to mention, be sure to follow along on our socials, TikTok, YouTube Reels. We're always posting on Twitter. Be sure to read both of these guys' articles too. They put a lot of work into it, and it's good content. So you can find both of them on Twitter and X and read their content. I always repost what they've got going on too, so be sure to check out my account if you can't find them. But leave us a like, subscribe, follow us everywhere we go. But unless you guys have anything, I think that's going to do it for today. All right, we will see you on Friday, I believe, as we preview the matchup against the Commanders and the Chicago Bears. Again, we'll see you on Friday. But with that being said, we're going to see you next time.